So thank you so much for giving me this opportunity. Usually, as also an academic researcher, sometimes you get the opportunity to publish something and all that. But these are kind of researches that sometimes you don't, it is not easy to publish in the academic journals and all that. But then it's also because you are engaging with minority groups who are really not so much enthused or so much influenced with formal education, and that makes the whole package quite difficult to fit in to certain demands when you want to publish. So this, I really consider it a great opportunity. So this page is just an introduction to myself. Um, I'm Desmond Olunwa, and then my organization is Green Africa Youth Organization. My main role is the programs manager, but it's an organization I co-founded, so I also quite entirely responsible for administrative work. In terms of activities and passion, I'm an activist for environmental and youth issues, and then my background is on climate governance. And my experience is also on green business strategies development and then community development. So the organization itself is a youth-led gender-balanced organization that was founded in 2014, and we work directly with local communities, minority groups, youth groups, and also directly on empowerment. So it could be waste management, where we have some of our projects, sustainable communities, um, among others, which I will be expanding on. Uh, we work in Africa and quite more dense in Ghana. So in terms of actual projects that are visible, those are in Ghana. But in terms of youth mobilization and then empowerment activities, we work in East, West Africa. So in Ghana, we have all these spots are where our projects are, where you have the question marks are places we are currently piloting, but cannot confirm that the model have proven to be stable. So a brief summary of what we have done since our inception is that we've had over 30,000 youth engaged at different levels and on different issues, and then about 2,000 directly empowered. And when we mean empowered, we are talking about people that are able to be supported either to get academic knowledge, to get career development, and to move from point A to B in their life. 150 women also empowered, and these are basically employees or people that we set up businesses for, and they are able to generate some income. And over 50 plus green jobs created. We work directly with communities, certain social enterprises, and also working with waste pickers and putting in financial literacy initiatives that help them to not only save but generate income. So all those are also considered here. And yeah, of course, as an environmental group, we do undertake massive tree planting activities. And for native plants, we have had 1,200 surviving, which we think is quite good. And we also work on waste management. So we work producing recyclable products, raincoats and school bags and other items from plastic waste. And on my left is the campaigns we have undertaken over the years that have made impact. This project I'm going to talk about is called Water for Adaptation, and it is it is something that is in the pilot phase. It's something that is under fundraising stage, but then it's also a research that we're trying to prove that a certain formula works when it comes to community-led initiatives in arid regions where climate hit harshly. So the background of the project is that these are communities in Bolgatanga. Bolgatanga is the extreme northern part of Ghana. It's actually a border region with Burkina Faso and Togo, and so it's very much closer. Not super close, but it's not so far away from the countries that are really experiencing the Sahara Desert. And so these are areas that I am personally familiar and personally attached to because I grew up there. And things weren't like this in the 1990s and then even the early 2000. But gradually, it gets drier and drier. Rains come in rather too late, and then they go rather quite early. And so traditional crops that are used to grow here do not last anymore. Either there is immediate drought and then a rain comes back, or there is immediate flooding, and then that is it. Nothing comes again, and usually these crops do not get to their maturity before they dry up. And this has been happening quite a lot now, and the subsequent implication of that is that we had so much climate migration, drought influence migration happening, and a lot of the energetic youth had to migrate to the southern of the country. Um, People have to rely on irrigation, which doesn't really work because how to get access to water for your crops is so quite impossible. And then the majority of the people that suffer are the women and children because there is really a disproportionate acknowledgement of gender roles in such communities. And so there's so much burden placed on women as a responsibility to take care of the family, whatever means possible. And then the children are the most of them are also girls who are now unable to really go to school because um, sometimes either it is one reason or the other. You do not have money to buy something, or a lot of them give even period poverty as an excuse because, well, I'm in my menses, I don't have money to buy sanitary pad, and so I can't go and be in this state in school. And sometimes it's a reality, so you cannot really override that. So we decided to do a thorough community entry and then try to understand what really is happening and to build data on what solutions are possible. And then we realized that those were the problems: poor access to drinking water, school absenteeism, loss of crops due to drought. And so we needed to come up with a project that either tackle all these things or go into at least solving one of them thoroughly. So we started to develop a project model which targets to regreen the area and then also put the farmers on climate smart agriculture opportunities. And so the project has three components. One is to provide potable drinking water for homes and schools, and that's the most immediate need because apparently a lot of them still use to drink from the river source. They have this huge river that passes through the communities and it's very extent. And unfortunately, there's been a lot of mining activities upstream and there's been a lot of sand winning. So these rivers for the past 6 or 7 years have dried up, and now it's so difficult to have access to drinking water. So that has also become the immediate need. And then the other thing is we need to put in women-led enterprises at the community level so that they are able to generate some level of income, at least to eliminate the period poverty. So that's the other component which we are now trying to set up um, material making shop where a lot of young and unemployed uh, girls would be trained to make. They could be making the reusable sanitary pad, but it's also sort of a local boutique where they are able to make all different kind of items that locally people need, and that also, and some of them that also have a national appeal where we can transport from point A to B and then facilitate the sales. And then we want to support the dug out wells for vegetable farmers. So people from this part of the country are very experienced in vegetable farming, and there used to be a very large tomato processing factory in the same region, in some uh, three or four uh, government administrations ago. But unfortunately, that has collapsed because of this particular issue where farmers are unable to produce to meet the demands anymore. So now we realize that why not give them the opportunity to utilize the skill they already have, the experience they already have in an area that is also very important for them to feed their families. So these are some of the photos that we had to go to the farmers to assess the reality on the ground, to talk to them and sort of let them come up with what they really need, how they need it, in which form they would appreciate. Of course, we would teach that to, and you will later see that, to suit what external people can understand and external partners would be happy to support. But then we really focus on community led in a way that they are able to relate with the support that we are giving them. So that's a farmer and you can see the well that we are standing. That well is actually very deep, and usually that is a river where you can see the edges. Water always go up to that level when it rains because it's always flooding. But then it runs off completely, and then because of the sun winning activities, it gets dry also within a month or so. And so this particular farmer, who is farming chili pepper, um, had to rely on this particular little dark well, and there's on the extreme right to me a little pumping machine that he uses to pump. What happens is that the wells also dry up because they are doing them manually. He dug that with his hands, sometimes with the support from the community people, and so it doesn't go as deep as it could go. It's, for example, this particular one was about 9 meters. And so that is deep if you doing something like that manually. But then if there was a machine support, could have gone as deep as 15, and that you can guarantee that that particular well will be able to supply not just one farmer, but a lot of farmers. So we have to do this needs assessment together with a lot of other farmers. As you can see, they are a very long stretch of women and men farming chili pepper and tomatoes and also onions along that stretch. So when we went into the community, we started to provide the immediate need, because there are it's a community, a long list of communities. There are about 7 communities altogether, and out of these 7 communities, we started with the least populated community, which is about 1,500 people. And then we provided a borehole, which is hand pumping, and I mean, I think a lot of people have a fair idea what a borehole is. So it's the water there you see is quite clean, and then we had some sort of Edeba, and then that is one of our friends who is just enthused with the project. When he got to the community and was trying to drink some of the water, so you can see just behind him, all those people are just young people. They are very young. They are at basic level in terms of education. And what they used to do was that they would get up around 4 a.m. and then go very long distance to queue in a different community to fetch water from a similar borehole, which was really devastating, because some of them, they end up getting back home around 9 or 10, and then they fear that if they go to school, the teachers will beat them for coming late, and so they end up not going to school at all. So we decided to provide this. And to be honest with you, this one borehole is definitely so small for a community of 1,500 people, talk less of the rest of the communities. So at the moment, we are fundraising to to drill additional boreholes. They are not super expensive. A borehole is around 2,300 or so British pounds, and but then that is an amount that such communities can never realize, and so there's the need for people like us to step in. So ideally, we were going in with a zero waste project, which we have done a lot and have built a successful model in the southern part. But then we get to the northern part, and then the reality is that you need to step in with what is immediately needed. And then we had to do that. And so we have, alongside this project, we have also taken advantage uh, to engage. I already talked about the fundraising for the enterprise. We are setting up community-led enterprise for the women there and the girls. They'll be using a number of sewing machines to make fabrics and make artifacts that are sellable, that are required at the local level. And this money goes completely to the women who are doing it, and then a quota goes to the community. And that quota that goes to the community is really meant to provide the basic necessities, so they don't have to go so far to be buying imported products that they can actually get at home at affordable prices. We've engaged over 3,000 young people also on this, educating them on climate change and what are the steps that they can take to support, reduce the harsh conditions that are likely to hit, and then also on waste management, because that was also part of the original idea. And we've so far also provided extension services to farmers, because now, while we look for more funding to support them do their project or be able to cultivate their crops, we also realize that we can provide them some knowledge on what other crops they can plant that can mature with little water or within short period of time, and how they can store those ones in order not to lose them post harvestly. And so we've been doing this, and also part of our waste management mechanisms, we have been a composting organization for quite a long time and have been producing compost. So we also advise the farmers how to apply this compost and how to limit or balance them with the synthetic fertilizers, because we actually think that for this community, after our analysis, there's been a lot of so much application of synthetic fertilizers with the view that, oh, it helps to because the farmlands have lost a significant biodiversity, soil biodiversity, so they apply so much of these synthetic fertilizers thinking that it gives immediate benefit. But then too much of it also has destroyed the soil biodiversity, which is so important for the crops that they grow. The main season they cultivate millet, rice, peanut, and maize. And then those are the main crops that they really have significant deficit now because of the soil not able to support the growth and also the drought coming in quite quick. And we've also, in this particular part of the country, we planted about 500 trees. And I must also add that for these 500 trees that we've planted, we just wanted to plant native trees that will regreen the place and some of them that can add to soil biodiversity. We were not really looking to forest the area. We just together with the farmers, we asked which of the trees that crops usually do well under. And they came up with a whole list. And then we said, okay, well, together with the students we are engaging, let's do this. We planted so many, but we only had 500 of them surviving because also it's quite difficult to care for them without water. They always have to go a long distance to fetch this water to go and then water those trees. But at least we think that 500 of them is a good start. And then we are fundraising for the to support the farmers to dig more wells. To it actually costs far less to dig the wells to compared to drill a borehole like this one. So it's almost like half of the price to dig a well, and then that well can support more than 5 farmers. And so we are at the fundraising stage to also do that and to get we have this youth organization called Period Link in the UK, and they are also very keen to support women do the enterprises. And so they are also doing a fundraising on GoFundMe, which I can share the link with you later. So now, this is where we try to compare impact in certain communities with impact in this particular community. So we've been working for over 6 years. We've done massive projects elsewhere, and we usually do not recognize how much it has impacted people's lives. But for this community, it's so real that just after drilling the first borehole, we had so many community groups coming out in their numbers just to say thank you. And if you see the smiling faces on these women when they saw the water, and then when they were told that their girls are going to have access to sanitary pads that are made locally, they were so happy. They were so happy. And that kind of impact just is so obvious that it is significant for them, even though we know that it is very limited and there's still so much pressure on the existing borehole. And the earlier we step in to provide more, the better to ensure its longevity. So yeah, another thing that we also now realize is that we want to develop a toolkit that is strictly for advocacy, that is strictly to balance the knowledge gap, because we've been a climate advocacy group, but also we mostly focus on high schools, universities, and among others. But then we realize that in these communities, there are people who have some level of knowledge about the changing environment, but they do not really know what do they do. And so we think we have to develop sort of an advocacy tool that balances this, giving them something in also their language that they understand, that something that is also pictorial, that they get to know that these are the changes and these are the things that we can possibly do to ameliorate whatever problems we are facing. And then You see the little picture on the other side where there's a lot of tree logging, because of course these communities, they rely on firewood. And so one of our project in the south focus on making charcoal briquette from rice husk, coconut husk, and sawdust. So we wanna step that into this community to also prevent the further cutting down of the remaining trees that are there. And I would admit that so far it's been quite smooth, because they are very welcoming. They are very, and it's also, I think it's also because we just make them the boss of the of the whole project, and we ourselves are just facilitating what we can bring into the project. And so they feel really the transparency level, and then they feel that they are the leaders, and which is quite helpful to the project success. So yeah, uh, we want to get to that point where this wouldn't be the story of one farmer, but then this would be the story of all the farmers there, that they are able to grow, and then we are able to eat like I'm eating there so comfortably. But that's just one person trying to put all resources and to get water to have the cross get to maturity. And yeah, the whole story is that we want to have more partnerships, and so anyone can be a part of this particular story. And then we can get to a point where we have a model that we would say, well, this is more qualified to go into the academic journals for communities elsewhere to replicate, and for organizations, humanitarian organizations elsewhere to also use to support um, climate hazards or disaster risk reduction in communities that are very hit by whether poverty or drought poverty. So this is the end of my presentation, and thank you.